#2 years later, Star Trek squandered its most compelling story. 2 years ago, Star Trek stood on the brink of something extraordinary. The franchise had rediscovered its soul, balancing bold science fiction storytelling with emotional resonance and thematic depth. Star Trek: Strange New Worlds had reignited excitement among old fans while attracting new ones. The franchise seemed primed to explore a narrative that could have become one of its defining achievements. But somewhere along the way, the momentum slipped. 2 years later, it's clear that Star Trek squandered what might have been its most compelling modern story. The story in question wasn't tied to a single episode or character, but rather a through line that touched every corner of Strange New Worlds, Discovery, and Picard. The tension between the utopian Federation ideal and the flawed humanity beneath it. It was the perfect theme for a modern era of Trek, one that could explore the consequences of hope in a fractured galaxy. Yet instead of leaning into that complexity, Star Trek retreated to safer ground, prioritizing nostalgia, episodic throwbacks, and inconsistent arcs over its most daring ideas. The promise of a new era. When Strange New Worlds premiered, it promised a return to optimism, bright starship corridors, moral clarity, and episodic adventures that echoed the original series. But beneath that optimism was a deeper, darker current. Captain Pike's foreknowledge of his own fate gave the show an existential weight, while Number One's Illyrian secret raised fascinating questions about Starfleet's prejudices and the hypocrisy embedded in Federation law. Even Spock's emotional journey hinted at a larger conversation about identity and belonging in an idealized society that claimed to have evolved beyond such struggles. That complexity made the early seasons of Strange New Worlds feel vital. They weren't just revisiting Star Trek's golden age, they were interrogating it. Pike's leadership embodied compassion, but it also revealed how maintaining moral ideals in a galaxy of chaos was an act of constant sacrifice. The show was positioning itself as a meditation on the cost of utopia. The other series seemed to echo that same question. Picard Season 3 gave audiences a glimpse of a Federation that had grown complacent, even cynical, where synthetic life was banned, and trust in institutions was fading. Discovery, meanwhile, showed a far future Federation fractured by distance and doubt, struggling to rebuild unity. Each show was exploring a different side of the same coin. It felt as though the franchise was building toward a unified statement, a grand reckoning about what the Federation means in the 25th and 32nd centuries. And then, the vision dissipated, playing it safe in the stars. Rather than deepening those ideas, the newer Star Trek installments have largely pulled back into formula. Strange New Worlds Season 3 continues to charm with its characters and tone, but the grand narrative of moral exploration has been replaced with lighter, fan-pleasing detours. Crossover episodes, musical experiments, and comedic outings, while enjoyable, have come at the expense of forward momentum. The franchise seems caught in a cycle of self-congratulation, mistaking nostalgia for progress. Instead of asking what the Federation's ideals mean now, Star Trek has focused on reminding us what they meant then. And while there's nothing inherently wrong with celebrating the franchise's past, doing so without evolving its philosophical heart risks turning Star Trek into its own museum piece. Even Picard's acclaimed final season, while emotionally satisfying, ultimately abandoned the deeper societal questions that once defined it. The Borg returned yet again. The moral ambiguity of Starfleet's bureaucracy was brushed aside, and the show concluded with a sentimental reunion rather than a challenge to its legacy. Discovery, which once dared to ask hard questions about rebuilding civilization, has similarly shifted focus toward spectacle and emotional closure. The story that could have defined modern Trek. At its best, Star Trek has always been about more than space battles and alien diplomacy. It's about who we are and who we strive to be. The Utopia Under Strange storyline that connected modern Trek shows could have offered a profound exploration of how societies maintain idealism in the face of entropy. Imagine if Strange New Worlds had followed through on its subtext, examining how Starfleet's moral code might falter when confronted with Pike's knowledge of his future, or how Una's persecution for being Illyrian could spark systemic reform. Imagine if Picard had used its exploration of aging and regret to confront how the Federation itself might grow old, its founding ideals eroding with time. Imagine if Discovery had truly grappled with the idea that progress can be